Do avoidants cheat? It's the question whispered in the quiet pain of partners who feel shut out. Because when someone withdraws, when they go cold, when they pull away into silence, it can feel exactly like betrayal. But is distance the same as disloyalty? Is avoidance just another word for cheating? Or is the truth far more complicated and far more painful? Today we're going to peel back the layers and look at what really drives avoidant behavior. Why some partners mistake coldness for infidelity, and why, for an avoidant, the real betrayal often happens long before there's another person involved. This isn't just about cheating. It's about the hidden truth of distance, the kind that eats away at intimacy, the kind that leaves one person starving, and the other pretending they don't even need to eat. So let's begin with the heart of the matter. Why distance, for an avoidant, is often mistaken for betrayal. Why distance and avoidance is mistaken for betrayal. When you love someone, closeness feels natural. You want to share. You want to open up. You want to lean in. That's how intimacy is built. Through proximity, through vulnerability, through shared presence. But with an avoidant, closeness feels like a threat. What feels safe to you, connection, feels dangerous to them. So instead of moving toward, they move away. Instead of leaning in, they lean out. Instead of opening, they shut down. And here's the painful twist. That shutting down doesn't look neutral. It looks suspicious. It feels like rejection. It stirs up fear. Because when your partner suddenly stops sharing, when they keep their phone closer, but keep you further, when they become a mystery instead of a companion, your mind starts racing. Are they hiding something? Are they talking to someone else? Is this coldness proof of betrayal? This is the trap of loving an avoidant. Their silence feels like secrets. Their distance feels like disloyalty. Their withdrawal feels like cheating, even if they've never touched another person. And this is why so many partners of avoidance live in a constant state of confusion. Because the behaviors of an avoidant, the secrecy, the shutting down, the pulling away, mirror the behaviors of someone who is being unfaithful. Both involve hiding. Both involve emotional withdrawal. Both involve creating a wall. And here's the cruel part. For the partner, the pain is just as sharp, whether there's another person involved or not. The feeling is the same. I've been abandoned. Now, let's dig deeper. Why does an avoidant behave this way in the first place? Why does love make them pull away instead of pull closer? It starts with the nervous system. Avoidants are wired to see closeness as danger. Their earliest relationships taught them that vulnerability leads to pain. So when someone tries to love them deeply, it doesn't feel like love. It feels like suffocation. So they retreat. Not necessarily because they're betraying you, but because they're trying to protect themselves. Here's the paradox. The very act of trying to stay safe makes their partner feel unsafe. Because safety, for you, means closeness. Safety, for them, means distance. And in that clash, both sides feel betrayed. You feel cheated of intimacy. They feel cornered by your need. And without words to explain this dynamic, the silence becomes deafening. The mistrust grows. And soon, what started as avoidance begins to look exactly like betrayal. This is the heartbreaking misunderstanding at the center of avoidant relationships. Most partners don't realize that avoidance isn't necessarily cheating, but it feels like it. And feelings, in a relationship, matter as much as facts. Because if someone isn't giving you honesty, intimacy, or emotional presence, if you feel invisible in your own relationship, then whether they cheat or not almost becomes irrelevant. The absence is its own betrayal. And that's why so many people say, I don't even care if they cheated. They already broke my heart long before that. But here's the dangerous truth. Avoidants don't always stop at distance. Sometimes, that distance does lead to betrayal. And the reasons behind that are even darker. Why avoidants rarely cheat for the reasons you think. Cheating is usually seen as simple. A partner feels dissatisfied. They want more excitement. They meet someone new. They betray. But for avoidants, the story isn't so straightforward. Their distance doesn't always come from seeking someone else. It comes from fear. Fear of intimacy. Fear of being needed too much. Fear of being trapped. This is why many partners misread their coldness. You think they're pulling away because there's someone else. But in reality, they're pulling away because there's you. Not because you're wrong. Not because you're lacking. But because you represent closeness. And closeness is the one thing their nervous system isn't built to handle. Think of it this way. For an anxious partner, closeness is oxygen. For an avoidant, closeness feels like drowning. So when you reach for them, they push away. And when they push away, you panic. You question. You assume betrayal. Because in your world, pulling away only happens when love is gone. But in their world, pulling away is how they keep love alive. By managing it at a distance they can tolerate. Here's the irony. Most avoidants don't cheat to escape love. They distance to keep it safe, at least in their own logic. But this safety feels like abandonment to you. It feels like dishonesty. It feels like betrayal. And in many ways, it is. Because betrayal isn't just about bodies. It's about hearts. It's about emotional truth. It's about presence. And when an avoidant denies you their presence, when they starve you of intimacy, that wound cuts just as deep as if they had cheated. But let's be clear, avoidants can cheat. And when they do, it often looks different than you expect. They don't usually cheat because they crave passion. They don't usually cheat because they're in love with someone else. They cheat because distance is their comfort zone. So if a third person offers a way to escape emotional pressure, if a third person doesn't demand closeness, if a third person feels easier than confronting vulnerability with you, that temptation can quietly grow. For them, the other person isn't always about love. It's about control. It's about keeping intimacy on their terms. It's about avoiding depth. And here's the painful truth. Cheating, for an avoidant, can actually be another form of avoidance. But why does this dynamic cut so deeply? Why is it so confusing for their partners? Because the signs of avoidance and the signs of betrayal look almost identical. Withdrawal, secrecy, emotional unavailability, a wall you can't seem to climb. You start questioning yourself. Am I imagining this? Am I being paranoid? Is there someone else? And the more you ask, the more they shut down, the more defensive they become, the colder they grow, leaving you with no answers. Only silence. And silence, in love, feels like torture. This is where many relationships with avoidance break down. Because the partner spends months, sometimes years, living in a state of suspicion, not knowing if the problem is cheating or if the problem is simply avoidance. And that lack of clarity can be just as destructive as betrayal itself. Because trust can't survive constant doubt, and love can't survive without trust. But here's the truth most people don't realize. Avoidants are less likely to cheat out of passion, and more likely to cheat out of fear. Fear of being consumed, fear of being trapped, fear of needing you too much. So cheating, for them, isn't about replacing you. It's about protecting themselves, even if it destroys you in the process. And that's the tragedy. Avoidants rarely set out to betray, but in trying to protect themselves from closeness, they often betray anyway. Not always through another person, but through the daily act of withdrawal, through the absence of presence, through the slow starvation of love. This is why partners of avoidance say, I don't know if they ever cheated, but I always felt like they were half gone. And that half gone feeling, it's enough to break a heart. So the real question isn't just, do avoidants cheat? The real question is, what kind of betrayal happens in the absence of intimacy? Because whether they cheat or not, the wound of avoidance cuts just as deep. And next, we're going to look at the signs, the subtle ways avoidance may signal their needs, and how you can tell the difference between distance and disloyalty. How to recognize the hidden signals, distance versus disloyalty. One of the most painful parts of loving an avoidant is not knowing what their silence means. Are they pulling away because they feel smothered? Or are they pulling away because they've betrayed you? Both look the same from the outside. Both leave you spinning in doubt. But if you look closely, if you learn their language of distance, you can start to tell the difference. Let's begin with emotional absence. Avoidance will often retreat emotionally, even when nothing is wrong. You'll feel them fade during conversations. Their eyes glaze over. Their answers turn short. They give you the shell, not the core. This doesn't always mean cheating. For many avoidants, it's their nervous system shutting down. Too much closeness feels overwhelming, so they create space by withdrawing inside. If you push harder, they'll retreat faster. If you ask for more, they'll give you less. That's avoidance, not necessarily betrayal. But betrayal has a different flavor. Distance from avoidance feels protective. Distance from betrayal feels deceptive. With betrayal, the avoidant doesn't just grow quiet. They grow secretive. They start guarding their phone. They change their routines without explanation. Their availability shifts in ways that don't add up. It's not just withdrawal. It's concealment. Avoidance says, I need space. Betrayal says, I need space and I need you not to see why. Think about how they handle questions. When an avoidant pulls back out of fear, they'll often respond with defensiveness, annoyance, a wall that says, stop pressing me. But when an avoidant pulls back out of betrayal, the answers carry a different weight. They become evasive. Their words don't line up with their actions. Their stories have holes. You don't just feel shut out. You feel misled. And that difference, subtle as it is the line between distance and disloyalty. Here's another marker, their patterns. Avoidance usually follows a cycle. Closeness grows. They panic. They withdraw. They return once they feel safer. If you look back over time, you'll notice the rhythm. Push-pull, near-far. But betrayal breaks that rhythm. When they're hiding something, the cycle changes. The distance lasts longer. The return feels half-hearted. The excuses multiply. It's no longer a dance of closeness and fear. It's a shift into double lives. But here's the hardest truth. Even when there's no third person, avoidant behavior can still feel like betrayal. Because betrayal isn't just sleeping with someone else. It's choosing walls over honesty. It's hiding your feelings instead of sharing them. It's letting your partner starve for connection, while you claim nothing is wrong. This emotional starvation, day after day, is its own kind of infidelity. So partners of avoidance often live in a gray zone, unsure if they've been cheated on, but certain they've been abandoned in spirit. How do you protect yourself from this gray zone? You start by learning to trust patterns, not promises. Avoidants often say, I love you, I'm here. But what do their patterns reveal? Do they disappear whenever intimacy deepens? Do they stonewall when you ask for reassurance? Do they guard parts of their life like a fortress? If the answer is yes, you may not be dealing with betrayal, but you're living with a form of absence that hurts just as much. Another signal lies in your own body. Our nervous system is wiser than we think. When something is off, you feel it. Your stomach knots. Your chest feels heavy. Your sleep grows restless. This doesn't mean your intuition is always right, but it does mean something is unsettled. Sometimes it's your own attachment wounds being triggered. Other times, it's your partner's secrecy seeping through. The key is learning to separate old fears from present truths, and that takes brutal honesty with yourself. So how do you do it? You ask questions not to control, but to clarify. You observe patterns without gaslighting yourself. You stop explaining away your own pain. Because whether it's avoidance or betrayal, your suffering is real. Your loneliness is real. Your need for truth is real. And no relationship can survive if one person's reality is constantly denied. But here's where things shift. Avoidants, as much as they run, leave behind subtle clues. Not the obvious kind, like lipstick on a collar, but nervous shifts in energy, moments where their wall slips. If you watch carefully, you'll notice it. When they're avoiding intimacy, their body language closes, arms crossed, face turned, eyes elsewhere. When they're avoiding discovery, their body language hides, phone face down, sudden tension when you enter the room, a nervousness they can't quite mask. It's not just space, it's secrecy. And this is the heartbreaking part. Sometimes you'll never know for sure, because avoidants rarely admit. They rarely give clarity. They'd rather escape than confess. So the real question becomes, how much uncertainty can you live with? Is their cycle of avoidance something you can accept? Or does the constant doubt erode you piece by piece? Because at the end of the day, the cost of being with an avoidant is often living without certainty. And sometimes that cost is heavier than betrayal itself. So here's the shift we need to make. Instead of asking, are they cheating? Ask, am I living in trust? Instead of asking, is this betrayal? Ask, is this love nourishing me? Because whether their distance hides infidelity or not, your hunger for connection is valid. Your need for presence is valid. Your right to clarity is valid. And love that constantly leaves you guessing is love that drains the life out of you. And that's where the power comes back to you. Because when you stop obsessing over their secrets and start focusing on your own truth, you reclaim control. You stop waiting for their walls to fall. You stop begging for clarity. You start choosing certainty for yourself. And that choice, that strength, is the one thing an avoidant cannot take from you. Next, we'll look deeper at what happens when distance does become betrayal. The tipping point where avoidance crosses the line. And why, for many partners, that moment feels both devastating and strangely, like confirmation of what they always knew. The cost when avoidance turns into betrayal. There's a moment many partners of avoidance fear. The moment the distance isn't just distance anymore. The moment it crosses the line. The moment avoidance becomes betrayal. And when it happens, it doesn't always look like the movies. There isn't always drama. There isn't always a big reveal. Sometimes, betrayal slips in quietly, through late nights unaccounted for, through text messages hidden, through unexplained absences wrapped in casual excuses. It's not the noise of betrayal that hurts most. It's the silence. Because when an avoidant betrays, they don't usually flaunt it. They conceal it. They bury it beneath the same walls they've used to keep you at arm's length all along. So when the truth finally cracks through, the shock isn't just about what they did. It's about how well they hid. And suddenly, every unanswered call makes sense. Every closed-off moment feels heavy with double meaning. Every night you felt alone was more than a feeling. It was reality. This is the cost of avoidance when it slides into betrayal. It corrodes the foundation of trust. It leaves you questioning not just the present, but the entire past. Was the love ever real? Did the words mean anything? Were you holding on to someone who was never truly there? This questioning is what breaks many partners. Because betrayal isn't just about losing the person, it's about losing the story you believed in. And here's the part that twists the knife even deeper. When confronted, many avoidants don't collapse into guilt. They don't rush to repair. They retreat further. Some deny, some minimize, some turn it back on you, accusing you of being controlling, paranoid, or impossible to please. This deflection is their shield, because admitting the truth would mean facing the intimacy they've run from their whole lives. Intimacy with their own shame, intimacy with your pain, and that's a closeness they cannot bear. So the partner is left not only with betrayal, but with isolation. The person who caused the wound is often the least capable of helping heal it. And that absence is its own kind of cruelty. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt when it happens. It hurts again when there's no repair, when there's no ownership, when there's no attempt to rebuild what was broken. Let's pause and name the layers of this cost. First, there's the loss of safety. Safety is the heartbeat of love. When it's shattered, everything feels unstable. Second, there's the loss of dignity. You gave your heart openly. They hid theirs behind secrecy. That imbalance leaves you feeling foolish, small, discarded. Third, there's the loss of trust in yourself. Because if you didn't see it coming, or if you felt it but doubted your own intuition, you begin to question your ability to ever trust again. But the deepest cost? It's the rewriting of your identity. When betrayal enters, you're forced to reevaluate who you were in the relationship. Were you blind? Were you not enough? Were you loving someone who never really existed? This identity crisis can linger long after the relationship ends. Because betrayal doesn't just fracture the bond, it fractures the mirror you see yourself in. And for the avoidant, the cost runs silent but deep. They may appear unaffected, detached, cold, but beneath the armor, they pay too. They reinforce their own cycle of mistrust. They deepen their belief that closeness is dangerous. They confirm their fear that love always leads to pain. So they build their walls higher. And in doing so, they trap themselves further in isolation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. By betraying, they avoid vulnerability, but they also avoid true connection. And in the end, they lose the very intimacy they secretly crave but cannot admit. This is the hidden tragedy of betrayal in avoidant relationships. Both people lose. Both people bleed. Both people walk away carrying wounds that reshape the way they love. And the scars don't fade easily. But here's where something important shifts. While you can't control an avoidant's choices, you can control what you do with the truth. You can face the reality. Instead of gaslighting yourself, you can name the betrayal. Instead of minimizing it, you can choose healing. Instead of living in the limbo of doubt. Because the cost of betrayal is high, but the cost of staying blind is even higher. So when avoidance turns into betrayal, the question becomes not, why did they do this? But what do I deserve now? Do I deserve secrecy? Do I deserve distance dressed up as love? Do I deserve a partner who disappears when intimacy deepens? Or do I deserve a love that shows up, even when it's hard? A love that doesn't run, even when closeness feels scary. That's the pivot point. The crossroads betrayal leaves you at. Stay in the cycle, or break it. Cling to the fragments, or rebuild from truth. Because the cost of avoidance becoming betrayal is heavy. But it can also be the moment you choose yourself again. And in the final part, we'll look at what happens when the cycle is broken, when avoidance is named, when betrayal is confronted, and when, against all odds, a different kind of love becomes possible, when the truth is faced, reclaiming power and redefining love. There comes a moment in every story of betrayal where silence is no longer enough, where you can't keep pretending distance is harmless, where you can't keep excusing patterns that destroy your peace. The truth rises, and whether the avoidant admits it or not, you begin to see clearly. And clarity is power, because once you see, you can't unsee. Once you name the distance for what it is, avoidance, betrayal, or both, you step out of confusion. You step out of self-blame. You step out of the endless loop of, is it me or is it them? The fog lifts, and with it, your strength returns. But let's be honest, facing the truth hurts. It hurts to admit the love you gave wasn't fully received. It hurts to realize the walls between you weren't yours to tear down. It hurts to accept that sometimes love isn't enough to change someone's defenses. And yet, this pain carries a strange gift. Because pain forces choice. Pain forces transformation. You either keep living in limbo, or you choose to rise. Here's what happens when you rise. You stop chasing answers from the avoidant. You stop begging them to validate your pain. You stop waiting for closure that will never come. Instead, you create closure for yourself. You say, I see what this was. I see what it did to me, and I choose not to stay here. That decision is the quiet revenge of healing. It's the reclamation of your life. Now, let's talk about the avoidant. When confronted with the truth, they face their own crossroads. Some double down. They deny, deflect, disappear. They cling to distance as their only shield. But others rarely, but sometimes, break. They glimpse the cost of their avoidance. They see the devastation of their betrayal. And in that moment, they feel the weight of what they've lost. This can become the beginning of their awakening. Because for an avoidant, true change only comes when the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of intimacy. But whether they awaken or not is not yours to control. Your power lies in your choice to heal, to move, to redefine what love means for you. And this is the deeper truth. Avoidance cheats sometimes with bodies, often with absence, always with distance. But betrayal, no matter its form, does not define your worth. It reveals their fear. It reveals their wounds. It reveals the battle they're fighting with themselves. And you are not the cause of that battle. You are not the casualty. You are the survivor. So how do you reclaim yourself after betrayal? First, you honor your pain. Stop minimizing it. Stop telling yourself it's not that bad. If it hurt, it mattered. Second, you trust your intuition again. The whispers you ignored, the gut feelings you pushed aside, they were signals. Learning to listen again is how you rebuild trust in yourself. Third, you redefine love. Love is not distance. Love is not secrecy. Love is not breadcrumbing presence while starving the bond. Love is showing up. Love is truth. Love is courage. And you deserve nothing less. Here's what's powerful. When you rise from betrayal, you don't just heal yourself. You break cycles. You teach your nervous system that safety is possible again. You teach your heart that trust can return. You teach your soul that love doesn't end in absence. It begins in truth. This is the rebirth waiting for you on the other side of the avoidance betrayal. And now, I want to turn this back to you because your story matters. What have you seen? What have you felt in the silence of an avoidance love? Was it distance? Was it betrayal? Or was it both, tangled together in a way that left you questioning your own reality? Share it below. Your voice may be the one that helps another heart feel less alone. If this video gave you clarity, if it helped you put words to the ache you've carried, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this truth. Because healing spreads when we share it, and love grows when we dare to name what hurts. So take this as your reminder. You are not too much. You are not unworthy. You are not the reason someone chose distance over devotion. You are the reason healing is possible. You are the reason truth can rise. You are the reason love will feel whole again.